All right. Uh, glad you guys can be here. I have some really, I have some really, I guess, spicy stuff for you guys. I haven't done like a video. I haven't done a video like this in a long time. I think my channel initially kind of really kicked off with me talking about dating culture and assessment, and I remember that I remember initially I wanted my work to be kind of grounded in you know philosophically exploring dating, what that means, what that looks like. um I guess this video will be like more of a reassessment on what I think. I might be even taking back some of the stuff I said, but honestly I don't remember half the things that I've said on the topic. But let's go into it. The title is called Dating Irony. Yes, Sam. Yes, I read it. I just read it. I'm gonna. Um, I yes, I agree. I haven't responded, but I agree with everything you said. Actually, I agree. Um, so I think a lot of the problems in relationships, and actually let's talk about the most blatant contradiction before I go into this, because I'd like to talk about this. The most blatant contradiction that you are watching right now is a single man telling you about relationships. That is the most blatant contradiction, and I love it. It's a single man, me, telling you about relationships, diagnosing relationships. Why? Well, because by virtue, the single man has failed, right? So in essence, he has a kind of failed subjectivity that can capture the failed subjectivity of relationships. Um, and this is the contradiction that I really like, right? Because a lot of people kind of go like, "Oh, you don't know because you're single, like so you don't know," um, and yada yada. But what's funny is like the failed subjectivity, the single man, he probably knows failure and limits more than most people, right? Whereas the person that's in relationship, they don't typically want a contradiction, right? They don't want it to be like, oh yes, I love you, but we're failing, you know. Even though falling in love already implies like a failing, like the fact that you're falling is already a failure. It's a limit. um, and yet ironically we don't like this contradiction. We don't like contradictions at all in our culture. But I really feel like the best way to overcome a lot of things that is happening in culture is embracing contradiction, like embracing irony. Be like, yes, yes, I would fuck this girl, but I won't because I love you. Like it'll be like, yeah, I love you, but I like this girl. I think she's hot. Um, and and it's funny because we don't want those contradictions to be apparent. In fact, I'm going to stretch my neck out here on the chopping block. I feel like most red flags, what culture defines as red flags, is contradictions. Like that, the contradiction is itself is a red flag. Like, oh, he says this, but he does this. Oh, she does this, but then she does this, and all these other things. So um, now there's some like what I would call like real red flags are the ones that we typically um, think of, like physical abuse, mental abuse. However, what makes these how can I put this? I would say physical abuse is probably the most apparent and obvious one. But when it comes to psychological abuse, in my opinion, it gets really tricky. And the reason why I say it gets really tricky is because it's hard, at least for me, to tell the difference between somebody that is shattering the image of your own ego and actually, psychologically abusing you. You know what I mean? Like, to me, I think sometimes people take what is an attack on their ego as psychological abuse, and then and so on. So what I'm trying to say is, fundamentally, it's, for me, it's really hard to reveal and show clearly that entanglement between ego, the ideal of your ego, the way you picture yourself, and how that person is shattering that conception. Like, for example, the idea of gaslighting, like somebody saying like, oh, you're such a liar, I didn't say that. And then someone goes, oh no, you're gaslighting me, like, because I did say that, I know that I said that, I didn't lie, and like all this other stuff. It's complicated because the person has a perception that they're not a liar, right? That they don't lie. And so they pride themselves off of that perceptual image, like, I didn't lie. um but it's like twofold, and it's very complicated to like dissect, because the person could be doing that manipulation at the same time, but then also you could as well be psychologically abusing yourself by holding and maintaining to that identity that you favor of yourself. um and what's really difficult, actually, and this is why I think gaslighting just needs to be dropped in general, as a term, because it's just a term that's sort of lost its utility, in my opinion, because now the abuser can use it and weaponize it against you, and then now you don't even know who's really gaslighting who. But in my opinion, so long as there's two, there's gaslighting. You're gaslighting each other. In fact, actually, if you want to take a Lacanian reading or a Lacanian understanding, the primary identification, the support by the other, is gaslighting. Like, you've literally gaslit yourself by, at least from Lacan's mirror stage, you've gaslit yourself by thinking that the image you see in the mirror is you. Like, you've gaslit yourself, like, right there. And then the person that says, "Oh, look at you in the mirror," also gaslighting you. Like, that's a Lacanian reading. I know I won't go into that too much because I'm not an expert in Lacan, who is, but you can see how it's very complex, and that's why gaslighting, like, as a term, just needs to be dropped, in my opinion. But you can see how complex the issue is, because what we're dealing with is that in relationships, you are constantly conflicted with someone attacking your image, the way you perceive yourself. I'm not a liar. I'm a good person. I don't sleep with other people. Yada 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 yada. And whether those things are true or not, you are having a defense against that. But then the other person, again, also could really be gaslighting. Like, they really could be, but it could also be you trying to, you could be simultaneously being, let me put it this way, you could be being gaslit by somebody, and then you could be gaslighting yourself, meaning like you don't want to believe that you could be something else, which means that the identity that you're desperately holding on to is also the very thing that is gaslighting you. So there's like a twofold gaslighting that's going on at the same time. And it's very difficult to decipher, because in my opinion, the most ironic thing to do, and I think Alex Ebert talks about this, is like the most difficult thing to do is to just let people think whatever they want to think about you. Like, take on the identity, like, whatever. Because what that allows, and this is what Ebert kind of argues, is that what that allows to happen is you go through like a kind of ego death. Like, you accept whatever face that the person wants to put on you. Like, go ahead, take it. Like, give me whatever mask you want to put on me. And, um, you know, eventually they come around. At least this, like, Ebert gives a wonderful example about like, his neighbor thought about something about him for a long time, and Ebert just let it happen. And then finally, like, it changed. But I think it's one of those things that we actually believe we can control people's perceptions about ourselves. And then that also we can control our own perceptions by tempering it, by arguing like, no, I didn't do that, no, no, no. And it's like, there's a way in which, yes, that person can be gaslighting you, but you're also gaslighting yourself because you really believe that you can maintain that perception about yourself, that image about yourself. And this is the complexity, in my opinion, with dating and human relationships in general. Like, we're trying to maintain an identity, but then the other questions that identity, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am. I'm a good person. I believe I'm a good person all my life. I've never lied. I've never cheated. And now I'm being accused. Um, this is all the hard and difficult things that is just, it's just difficult. Let me briefly read some of Sam's comments here. She said, would this be kind of like a woman saying, hey, I need you to step it up and learn how to control your temper? And the guy says, I don't have a temper. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it really comes down to like the violence of language again, because it's like, one, and a lot of real life situations, like, you don't really have room to be super philosophical. Like, well, what do you mean by my temper? Like, what is it that you think it's me being angry, and all this other stuff, and what is her perception of control? You know what I mean? Like, what is her perception of control? Is it him not acting out? Is it him raising his voice? Like, there's so many difficult things with like emotions that is like, oh babe, like you should not freak out, like you're acting crazy, right? Like, this is obviously a very triggering term for a lot of people. Like, no, you're making me crazy. Like, when you say don't act crazy, it may almost have the same effect of like, no babe, like you need to control your temper, like, and then he may feel like he is, and he's like, what the, like, I am, but now you're making me lose it. So there's so much misinterpretation and a conflict with language about what the other perceives as temper. If the other actually agrees, like, yes, I understand that I get angry and all this other stuff, and I'm doing better, maybe that's a better way. Like, he understands this contradiction there. But I've noticed that there's always a discrepancy of terms when it's thrown around that, oh babe, you're acting crazy. Like, okay, what's crazy for you then? Like, what is by definition acting out crazy? And most of the time the other can't even explain it. They'll be like, it's this, like you acting like this, this is what makes relationships very difficult, because someone's like, you acting like this, and like, acting like what? Like, acting like this. And yeah, it's such a difficult thing. She's like, not gaslighting, but what you said before. As long as there are secrets and inability to have introspection, both will gaslight each other. Yeah. The inability to have introspection is probably the one of the biggest elements, and then the other would be like, they're just like, a lot of people are just not willing to accept like a contradiction about themselves, and I think sometimes that contradiction comes out obviously through the other, right? It becomes like the most manifest through the other. And this is what's always difficult to swallow, is that you never have a full complete picture of yourself, and the partner that you have is the one that presents another possibility of the way you can be viewed, seen, identified as, and that makes it very difficult. That makes it very difficult for people. Let me see. Sam said, maybe, I think, maybe not.